Hey guys, and welcome to the top 10 things Dark Souls 1 got wrong. Now, a few things before we start. There's actually a few more points than 10, but we wanted to give it like a catchy title. The next is, if you can't take criticism for things that you like, then you might well not want to watch this video. We love Dark Souls 1 and it's our favourite game, but we still think that you can be critical of things, and we said we were going to make this video, so we made it.
And just as a full-on disclaimer here, we're not going to compare Dark Souls 1 to Dark Souls 2 because Dark Souls 2 came out after Dark Souls 1, and it's not fair to hold Dark Souls 1 up for the sins that Dark Souls 2 doesn't have after it's an improvement. If we do bring up Dark Souls 2, it's not because we're trying to take away from Dark Souls 1, it's because we're trying to highlight the fact that they actually did improve something in a later game.
Yeah.
So if we do bring up Dark Souls 2, we're using it as a reference to show that they did move on, not to say that Dark Souls 1 is bad because Dark Souls 2 done it better. We're just basically saying thank you for fixing this in Dark Souls 2.
Yeah, we already had the gripes there and they fixed it.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and move on to point number 1. So, the first point, of course, is how pointless that dual wielding is in Dark Souls 1. Other than a few weapons, there is pretty much no reason to have anything other than a shield or a casting tool in your left hand.
Now, you may think that we are comparing Dark Souls 1 to Dark Souls 2 in this sense, but we're actually comparing to Demon Souls where
there hasn't been any improvement, there's been no effort.
Yeah.
Like, if you're going to let us put a weapon in the left hand, then give us a reason to. Because outside of the parry dagger and maybe the tracers, I can't think of any weapon I'd ever want to use in the left hand over the right hand.
Yeah, exactly. So there's no real advantage to it. If anything, I mean, most of the time it's kind of just a disadvantage or an aesthetic thing.
Yeah.
So, like I said, it's a bit nitpicky, but that is one problem of Dark Souls 1. Okay, so point number 2, and another nitpicky type point, is that Dark Souls 1 throws you straight into NG+ after you defeat Gwyn. So, you only get the option of either picking one of the endings, you can't home or bone out, and really we would have preferred it if you could manually go into NG+ if you want. Like, you could leave and do whatever you wanted, and then go into NG+ when you were ready, but instead the game does throw you straight into it, and we would prefer if it didn't do that like it done in Dark Souls 2. Now, again,
that's not to say that it's bad because they done it better in Dark Souls 2.
We always had this issue.
We always had this issue with Dark Souls, even before Dark Souls 2 was a thing. We're just highlighting the fact, once again, before anybody writes their 20-page comment, we're just highlighting the fact that they did improve that in Dark Souls 2 for a sec.
So, it would have been nice if they didn't throw you straight into it, and it also means that you can't PvP with Gwyn stuff without going into New Game Plus.
You can't even make a sword until halfway through New Game Plus, and then everything after that is...
So that's not really a big issue, but it is still an issue regardless.
Yeah. So our next point is the arena. Now, Dark Souls 1 did add an arena, but it added it as part of a DLC, which is kind of a bad thing. It should have just been in the base game, because when you add something as a DLC, especially an arena, what you've done is you've split the player base, and what ended up happening with the arena is that it died. And the arena was actually good.
Yeah.
The arena was good, but it just came too late. It segregated the player base just a little bit too much, and it ended up that instead of fighting in the arena, people would just stand outside the arena and invade in Ulasil because they at least get a fight that way.
What they should have done is given the players the arena in the update patch for the DLC. That way, everyone could have used it and it wouldn't have split the player base. But it was stuck inside the DLC, so it meant that not everybody get to actually experience it, and people just stuck to what was actually happening in the first place. So.
Yeah, they just went back to the Burg or back to Darkroot or back to Ulasil because nobody was in the arena.
And like we said, the arena was great, but it's a shame. But you know, there's something that was
something they did improve on in Dark Souls 2, of course, but that's a different video, obviously.
Okay, so this one is pretty subjective, and we know that a lot of people don't agree with this, but we feel that there wasn't like an amazing punishment for death in Dark Souls 1. So when you died, you became hollow, and it meant that you couldn't be invaded. But if you were playing offline anyway, there was it didn't matter like at all. So
it just cost you 1 extra humanity to kindle the bonfire is really the only punishment you got, but you got an abundant source of humanity.
Yeah.
So there was really no punishment for death in the long run.
Other than the chance of losing your souls. In Demon Souls, you obviously lost like half your health, which was obviously that was too extreme.
Yeah, that was a big extreme.
And again, yes, sure, Dark Souls 2 did improve on that, in our opinion, but we felt that that should have been implemented for Dark Souls 1 anyway. It is cool that if you are playing online, if you wanted to kindle a bonfire, you had to go human to get extra Estus, and that extra Estus, the payoff for that was you could be invaded, but you know, we don't feel that
they
was...
just kindle a bonfire, jump off the bridge, and then show up at the bonfire and continue, and you've got your extra Estus, and you're back to offline mode. Okay, so our next point is Covenants. Now, the Covenant structure is really weird in Dark Souls 1, where you have 3 Covenants which work as intended and work well. Then you have 3 covenants which are utterly fucking pointless, and then you have a grey area with the other 3 covenants. So the ones that work well, obviously, are the invading covenants. Obviously, the PvP covenants are the co-op covenants. So we've got Darkmoon Blades, Dark Wraiths, and the Forest Covenant. Those ones, their purpose, perfect, they work fine. The 3 shit ones, we've got the Way of White, the Princess Guard, and the Chaos Covenant, because they serve almost no purpose in the overarching gameplay in any way. The Chaos Covenant is just buy a door for 30 humanity.
Which could have been a key somewhere.
Could have been a key somewhere, yeah. Could have been something like you would passively gain more humanity instead, which you could then give to whatever.
It could have just been much better.
It could have been much better, yeah.
You can just join that covenant, get the Pyromancy and leave, and that's it.
Way of White has no purpose other than buying stuff from Petrus early, and the Princess Guard Covenant, the only reason to be in that is to use the big sunlight miracles, but they get the questionable ones, like the Sunbros, who could have had a much better overarching story in general. Could have been like, instead of killing Solaire to get all of his stuff, you'd get, you know, join the Covenant, you get Lightning Spears, and then you get Great Lightning Spears, and then the third reward would be all of Solaire's kit.
Instead of nothing.
Instead of nothing. And then if you complete Solaire's questline and save him, he would give you Sunlight Spears as a welcome to stage 4 of the Sunlight Covenant, or something like that. And then of course the Dragon Covenant, which is just, it sounds like it should work really well, but there's just too many barriers of entry to an invasion that you just can't PvP with it efficiently to rank it up.
And then with Gravelord, you're not even sure if you're even doing anything.
It's not a covenant that is user active.
Yeah.
Which is
you don't get a lot of feedback with it.
You don't get any feedback with it other than someone has invaded you to try and stop you Gravelording them.
Yeah, so, I mean, although it's better than Dark Souls 2 in the sense that there is 3 covenants that work exactly as they should.
Instead of 1.
The other ones are just it's a bit wishy-washy here and there, and it would have been nice if all of them were as fleshed out as the first 3, really.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next point, and this is a little bit subjective, but it's the fact that the game's quality after placing the Lord Vessel does dip a little, and you know, when you look at Lost Izalith, which is easily one of the worst areas in all of the Souls series, it's a shame that the end of the game was clearly rushed. We know that it was rushed, you know, it's been said to be rushed. Gwyn could have been so much better, etc. I mean, there is obviously like good areas and good bosses and stuff, but it's just because the game peaked at Anor Londo and Ornstein and Samo. After that, it was hard to maintain that quality, and because of the rushed schedule, the quality did suffer because of that.
That's what happens when you set the bar too high for yourself.
Yeah.
That's all they did was set the bar a little too high.
In terms of world design, the later areas of the game really aren't as good. They don't connect onto the world the way the rest of the areas do. That might have been intentional, but it would have been nice if they did all link up together. But again, rush schedule, that's what happens. Okay, so this is another point where it's something that was a downgrade from Demon's Souls, and that's the upgrade system. In Demon's Souls, the upgrade system was really robust, and you could add a lot of different effects to your weapons with variations of like scaling or health regeneration and stuff like that. But in Dark Souls 1, all you really got was an added damage type, or Raw and Crystal, which was its own kind of little thing. But it really doesn't compare at all to Demon's Souls. And granted, yeah, the system for leveling up your weapons was much more streamlined.
In Demon's Souls. Garbage in Demon's Souls.
It was horrible in Demon's Souls, and it was made much better in Dark Souls 1, but it could have been made better with, you know...
They could have had the same amount of content and just made it better. They could have just streamlined it more, and that would have been perfect. If they just fixed the Demon's Souls weapon upgrade path system and made it less complicated and put that in Dark Souls 1, that'd be great.
Yeah, so that's all they need to do.
They took away a bunch of upgrade paths, unfortunately.
And it would have been nice to have all the options that you got in Demon's Souls.
All the extra variety. Like, you don't know if this weapon is higher dex scaling or if it's just a heavy investment in bleed. You don't know.
Yeah.
It'd be fun to find out, but alas, we never will.
Okay, so here's a problem that was present in Demon's Souls and Dark Souls 1 and then went on to be fixed in Dark Souls 2, and that is overall the user interface. In Dark Souls 1 and Demon's Souls, the user interface was fucking toilet. And
especially Demons.
Oh yeah, especially. And it was completely improved in Dark Souls 2. Now again, this was something that we had a problem with in Dark Souls 1, but if you take Dark Souls 2 as an example, literally every single aspect of the user interface is improved. The fact that it's non-list based menus, you can see your character when you're equipping stuff.
Thumbnails for bonfires.
Oh yeah, just everything, like...
Yeah, this is all stuff that we wanted in Dark Souls 1 before Dark Souls 2 even happened. Yeah. So that's why it's a relevant point right now.
Being able to take more than one soul packet at a time, being able to see all your items in a grid as opposed to a list.
Yeah, being able to give more than one Covenant offering at a time.
Yeah, so really an improvement overall that really should have just been that way in the base game, but it wasn't.
And of course the iconography as well.
Yeah.
Absolute trash tier. It did improve since Demon Souls, let's be clear there. The iconography in Demon Souls is by far the worst in the series, and Dark Souls 1 is a lot better than it, but it's only a lot better in comparison to Demon Souls. It is shit compared to almost any other form of iconography they could have had. Yeah. Fire the iconographist. So now we're going to move on to the points that sort of involve PvP a lot more. So the first one we're going with is resistance being a completely fucking useless stat.
Yeah, nobody used it for anything. There was literally 0 point of being in the game, and it's also highly annoying that they never even patched in a reason for it being there.
Yeah, and the higher level you are, because of the way that passive resistance is built up, the higher level you get, resistance actually does less for you, which is even worse. It's just a stat that they should have just patched out, or patched it to make it give you actual good extra benefits or something.
Yeah.
I don't know, like maybe if resistance was good we could have had the tanks in there, but just it wasn't very good. And
now something that I'm glad that they did change in Dark Souls 2 is the fact that equipment weight was tied to endurance as well as stamina.
Yeah.
So what that essentially done was, if you wanted to be like a fast character, so you wanted a lot of stamina, it automatically gave you more equipment weight, so you could just put on more armor anyway. So it kind of, there was no compromise there, so it reduced the build variety really. So, and not only that, if you were, you know, on the flip side, if you were a heavy, like,
strength build, for instance, you like a Demon's Great Hammer or something like that.
You needed a lot of equipment weight, but that in and of itself gave you more stamina.
It gave you max stamina because you got max stamina at 40.
Yeah.
And then you'd only get equipment weight afterwards, which means that the fast builds would only go to 40 endurance, but they're on the same level as the strength build that's at fucking 40 endurance because it needs to go to 40 endurance for the carry weight, but they're on the same stamina level essentially.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't make sense. Why would you go the light fast build when you can just go to the same endurance and tank on the armor and poise anyway?
Exactly.
Other than personal preference, endurance it just takes away from the game's variety for PvP.
Yeah, so I'm glad they fixed that, but this is just something
I do agree with equipment weight and stamina being separate, because you should have to choose between more stamina or more armor.
Yeah.
You should have to choose between that. It shouldn't be inherent that if I get more stamina, I get more armor. That's how we see it.
Right, so next off is poise. I'm sure you knew that this would be in the list at some point. Now, don't get us wrong, the inclusion of poise was better than the non-inclusion of poise, but it was included in a way that just made it incredibly abusable and broken.
You can take 3 hits from the 4 kings and not get staggered. That's too much poise.
Yeah, they never included things like would automatically stun you, like maybe a two-handed R2 from certain weapons. Maybe not like a dagger, but like certain long swords or poking attacks or whatever.
You should always be stunned if you get hit with a fucking great sword R2. Yeah. Always be stunned. But you're not if you've got enough poise. You can just poise round them and fucking take a backstab or something. And
maybe crank back the numbers just a little bit, because it just meant that you could do, you know, poise backstabs.
Poise stacking was a huge issue in PvP in particular, because it allowed you to do poise stabs against almost any weapon in the game. So, and then you could just stack poise and use like a curved greatsword, so you could have like the infinite attack combo where you can't break the stun, and you only got that because you had more poise than them.
It really needed to be a middle ground between Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 2, like for both of them, but
Dark Souls 2 wasn't out. Dark Souls 2 wasn't out at that point, but what it needed to be is a middle ground between Demon Souls and Dark Souls 1. Demon Souls had no poise, but Demon Souls had hyper armor where some attacks you wouldn't be staggered from, which is a great addition. It makes these heavy weapons usable. But
well, it was like that in Dark Souls 1.
In Dark Souls 1 though, the poise was just off the fucking Richter scale. It was way too much.
Yeah.
Way too much. They needed to tone it down a little bit.
Okay, so I'm sure
the biggest point,
yeah,
in our eyes, the biggest flaw with Dark Souls 1 when it comes to PvP.
And I'm sure you know what we are.
Half of you don't agree with us. We know this already, but we definitely do believe that the backstabs in Dark Souls 1 are fucking broken.
Yeah, I mean it applies for PvE as well, because you can just go behind enemies, just backstab them really easily.
You know something in a game is too strong when, regardless of the scenario, the best possible solution is to backstab it.
Yeah.
It is the best attack to use offensively, it is the best attack to use defensively. It worked in such a way with the instant locking animation and stuff like that, that the PvP then centered around it, which was really nice. See, every single PvP match that you will see of Dark Souls 1 nowadays is 2 people circling each other until one of them drops the shield to attack. But while they're attacking, the other guy is still circling for the backstab. Guarantee you'll see a fuck ton of that. Because that's all it is now, is just circle for a backstab and win. Because the backstab is the most beneficial attack to do in every single situation.
We understand that people like that whole backstab meta thing, and if you like that, fine, but we personally just prefer the lot more varied tactical baiting out of Dark Souls 2, which we would have liked Dark Souls 1 to be, and it was like that for some games, but any games, mostly, you're just backstab fishing.
There's chain stabbing.
Yeah.
Where you literally have to guess which chain stab they're going to go for to escape.
You know the game's bad when the exploits can only be
beaten by exploits.
Yeah. So then, I mean, it also brings on to the next point of the netcode itself, which is just absolute dog shit. Sometimes it's okay, and again, they did improve it a little bit in Dark Souls 2, but it's just, the desync for so many games is just abysmal. Like, if this was in any kind of shooter game, and we know the game isn't a PvP focused game, but the fact that it is there and it was adopted, so, like, by so many people.
Netcode, but yeah, because of the netcode, it made the backstab even more broken, because thanks to lag, you then had more time to get caught by a backstab.
Yeah. Because
the instant lock of the backstab animation is what would resync the netcode for like a split second, where they can roll behind you, and although they're like on your screen, they're still exiting the rolling animation, but then out of nowhere, bang, you're locked into a backstab because the netcode catches up with a backstab. The desync catches up because it's an instant lock animation that must show on both screens at the same time, whereas attack animations and rolling animations, stuff like that, there can be a delay between them apparently, which is okay.
Yeah.
So you can witness the netcode in action, obviously.
And I mean, that's it for Dark Souls 1 bad points, really. Again, there was not a whole lot wrong with the game. There is a few flaws, sure, but they didn't actually detract from the experience at all. Unlike Dark Souls 2 flaws, which did massively detract from the experience. So that's the big difference between Dark Souls 1 and 2. It did have flaws, but the flaws weren't so bad that you played the game and you're like, what the fuck?
There are some, like, the small niggling flaws that we took from the PvE can easily be overlooked for the overall experience, which is just much better than any other game in the series, in my opinion.
Or any other game, really.
Any other game in its genre as well. Like, any other game that's in the realm of fantasy RPG, I think Dark Souls does it better. Almost everything better in almost every way than every other RPG. Agreed. Other than a few points, of course. But that's why we compare every game to Dark Souls. That's why our last point is literally the fact that Dark Souls has ruined every other game for us.
Yeah.
We don't want to play these games because Dark Souls is just better.
Yeah. For instance, The Witcher, when it comes out to the combat, the game would have been so much better if it would just straight up
copy Dark Souls 2. Yeah. Just copy it. It would have been way better. But I guess that's for everything wrong with The Witcher video, which is going to be 10 minutes of why the combat is shit.
But yeah, so I mean, that's it for this video, and we hope you enjoyed that.
So now you guys can put on your fanboy glasses and proceed to write a 20-page essay in the comments section about why we are wrong and why we should hang ourselves. But while you're doing that, just know that we're in Dark Souls 2, not getting chain stabbed like a motherfucker.